So I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Lenox Public Schools on November 9th, 2022. And the first order of business is hearing of visitors. Any public comment? Okay, I have no correspondence tonight, so we'll move on to the school committee meeting minutes of October 20th.
It looks like there might be something in your chat queue up there.
That's Anna Pedersen, as you can hear us.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so Anna, let us know when you can hear us. So school committee meeting minutes of October 20th.
I move we approve the meeting minutes for the October 20th meeting.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting minutes for October 24th.
I move to approve the meeting minutes from the October 24th meeting.
I second that as well.
Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Amy, I'll abstain.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to move on to the interim superintendent appointment and Warren.
Yeah, so we, HR subcommittee met, I don't know, the weeks all blur together, but it was probably last week, and voted to recommend that the school committee appoint Jake Everwine as interim superintendent. Jake is here to, I doubt he has an extensive formal presentation, but at least say hi, and also certainly if folks have any questions for him, it'd be a good chance to ask. You know, I think speaking for myself, at least, I'm very excited by the experience he can bring to the district for the rest of the year, and the enthusiasm and commitment he's already shown to taking this on. He would be in person in the central office 3 days a week, and then on call and accessible the other 2. And it would be with a start date of December 12th. So we would need to figure out a few transition days right around there. But generally speaking, that's what we'd be looking at. I think I also just important to emphasize what he's doing now, which is incredibly important work also both with Burke 12 and with there's like a 5-letter acronym, Regional School District Planning Board.
Got it.
For Berkshire Hills and Southern Berkshire. And so he's talked with all of them. He'll be limiting that work to give us attention we need, but I think it's important that we all know and everyone's clear that there will be sort of a shared responsibility, and he'll continue to have obligations to continue that process moving forward. I don't know if you want to say anything else on top of that.
No, I mean, thanks obviously for considering me and reaching out, and I appreciate the conversations I had with Oren and other folks in the district. It feels like a privilege to serve. Obviously, I have a really important set of projects I'm working on, and I think the ability to sort of shape an arrangement that allows me to help you all out for a period of time and continue that work at the same time is important. And so while I appreciate, you know, the confidence that you're placing in me, I will work really hard for you and hopefully be able to add some value to your district for the period of time here. I also just want to thank the 2 other boards I work for. I work for the Burke 12 board and the Regional School Planning Board. Just again, I'm a straight shooter. To be honest with you, I think the way we're going to work this out, I have full-time commitment right now between those 2 boards. I'll be sort of shifting the Burke 12 management duties to someone who currently reports to me, and I think my energies will be primarily focused on regional school planning, and because they're at a very, very close point of decision down there, and whether they're going to work with the merger or not. So it's obviously very important work, and I feel like a level of loyalty and commitment to them. While I also know that the mission of Burke 12 is to help districts when they're in need, and it seems right now that you all have a need, and I'm here. So I'm here to help. So I really, again, knowing a number of administrators that I've worked with over the years, I got folks behind me and to the right and left, is really a nice way to enter a district with some already established relationships and working relationships where I feel we can roll right in. And then I look forward to obviously transitioning with Mark, and then working with you all in terms of what are the things you want me to focus on, work through, and do my best to help you as you sort of engage in the long-term search, both for your superintendent and other administrative vacancies that are really important to the district. So,
Yeah, and Mark is preparing, shortly for us a transition list of the many things that some of them are committee items and some of them are superintendent items, and some of them are shared items that we'll be working on, and that'll be good. It'll be a good document for us to be thinking about as a committee, and also it'll be great for the two of you to have a chance to share what's currently on the plate, and what's critical,
well, the good news is the last time I was in the superintendent role, I think I had 3 kids at home, and the time before that I had 5 kids at home. So now I have 0. So,
knock on wood.
So night meetings actually are no longer really a problem. I'm saying to my wife, how do we actually work through that with all those kids around? She's like, we can work through it. I did. So, anyways, no, I look forward to spending some time here. You got an exceptional district. It's clear. You have a top district who's doing amazing work with kids in the community. You have a great deal of pride. And you got some challenges you're working through, and we'll I can help you with that. Work through those. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
any questions for Jake?
I just want to make a quick comment. First, I'm sorry. I was on time for the meeting in the wrong place. I feel like, doesn't matter how many times Amy tells us, don't forget. I came walking in, but I happened to be you couldn't be present in the building, but the Berk 12 presentation at the MASC conference.
Okay.
And in addition to just appreciating the update from that, because previously, I'm Veronica Fenton.
Yeah.
I attended some of the meetings in the early iterations of the regional planning division. And I also was kind of piqued about the role of Berk 12 to do some recruitment. And so when we think about this issue of leadership, building leadership and cultivating, people into the leadership roles, I really appreciate that you're looking at that from a broader perspective than each individual district, because with small districts, sometimes that's a challenge. And so I'm really looking forward to some brainstorming around that as well, which overlaps with our conversation about the need to place some good leaders in our district. So that'll be good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a serious problem. I mean, Tim and I worked together last spring, and he wrote a really comprehensive study on what we call talent development in Berkshire County, which is a lack of the teachers, support personnel, and leaders, and it's worrisome when you can't get leadership role filled. I love Bill Cameron to death, but Bill Cameron can only do so many. Right? We really do have to work hard at identifying people, and then I think helping them. I mean, right now it's a challenging time to step into these roles. I think the last couple of years have really made it even more less attractive for leaders to want to step into these roles. And so, I think we have to really work hard. And we were on a call last week with MCLA just saying, they have got a big leadership academy to bring folks in primarily from New York in the summer. And, how can we really begin to sort of start to tap some up and comers on the shoulder and say, this is really good work. It's important work. We need leaders, and we see you as stepping into these roles. So, but I think it's something we have to really do together. So I really appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions for Jake?
Really a question, but if you're getting up to speed, if you need anything, please reach out and ask.
Thank you.
We're not
Yeah,
standoffish, and we're more than happy to help in any way we can.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to need to have a vote to appoint Jake Eberwine as our interim superintendent. So we'll take a motion.
I move that we appoint Jake Everwine as our interim superintendent through the end of the 2022-2023 school year.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item is the superintendent search. So, pass over.
We just found a superintendent.
Done.
Yeah.
I'll make them right away.
We also met last week, HR subcommittee, to select a search firm for the permanent superintendent search. We were happy to learn that under our contract with MASC last time around, they were actually obligated to support us free of charge because we're coming back within 2 years. And so NESDEC provided a very nice proposal, but we're unable to compete on price. And so we opted to go with MASC. Liz LaFond will be our point of contact, and we have provided her with a sort of full rundown of everything we want in the posting that was based on what we've used in the past. But Ronnie, Megan, and I sort of went through and updated it. And then she is joining our meeting that we have tomorrow to walk through the process in more detail. So I think our goal is still to have the initial posting go out either Friday or next Monday. And then the 2 other key items we'll be talking about with her. One are formulating the search committee. And then the second is planning for a community forum. And that can all be happening in parallel while the applications are coming in. We'll have a December 15th. Well, we'll talk with her about it, but the preliminary timelines have a December 15th deadline for applications, which would allow us to screen and set up first round interviews. Those interviews would happen immediately after New Year's, that first week back in January. And then with some, we'll see exactly what happens, but that leaves us in good position to be doing the final interview and a selection the week of January 16th. So that's what we are aiming for. And now that we are working with them, she has at least put me on the list of all the other superintendent blasts going out, so I can confirm that we are caught up and back on the timeline with everybody else. I don't know if you guys have anything to add, but I think that's where that is at the moment.
No, I think it's good. I actually, again, I was at MASC, and there was one of the sections was about finding superintendents. So, and then it was a different presenter. It was Dorothy Presser, who's great, you know, the MASC person. So there was a lot of information that we then, it was timely enough to then share and discuss within our HR committee. So it was really helpful. There was a lot happening at that conference. I'll encourage people next year to try to go if you can. It's really, there's a lot that's happening, and it's really can be a little inspiring too, even when you're in the weeds of it, but it's good. And thank you for leading the charge for us.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions for Lauren or any of the members of the HR?
Did we satisfy all our concerns around remote working and geography? And
So for purposes of posting the job, our draft wording, we want to get Liz's feedback on. Just they usually use says requirement of the job will be to live in or near Lenox, Massachusetts. At some point, we will need to have a conversation in executive session about sort of what our negotiating position is around that, around compensation, kind of everything. But my expectation is we probably do that at the next meeting once we're, there's none of that. That is all left in very general terms for the posting that goes out.
We kind of have a wider sweep, and
Right.
then we can, if we're fortunate enough to get a good response.
Okay, superintendent's report.
All right, we'll start with some highlights and recognitions. So I think the first highlight that I'd like to share with the committee and the community is just a recap of fall athletics. So we had a great season. Boys soccer finished season with a 5-12 record. They're the runners up to Westfield Tech in the Class D Western Mass tournament. They lost in the first round of the MIAA tournament against Hopkins Academy. But again, nice season to be able to be competitive, especially down the stretch for the boys soccer team. Girls soccer literally just played a game today in the state tournament. They were eliminated by Munson, who was the #1 seed. So they had a tough draw here in that round of the tournament. But they finished the season with a 7-9-2 record. They went to the Western Mass Class D tournament where they lost to Mount Greylock in the semifinals. But again, they went to the MIAA tournament and made it to the round of 16. And unfortunately, ran into Munson early on in the tournament. But again, great season. Some huge performance by some of the girls who, again, really step up and play some great soccer. So nice season for them. Volleyball finished the season with an 8-12 record. They lost to Mohawk Trail in the Western Mass tournament. They advanced to the state tournament in the round of 32, where they lost to last year's state champion, who was also undefeated this season, Paula Ferrari Charter School. So again, we've had the, I think, unfortunate luck of running into some juggernauts early on in the tournament. Our football team, that's a co-op with Lee, Wildcat Football, finished the regular season as league champions and lost to Kip Academy in round of 16 in the state tournament. Cross country running, the boys team finished their season undefeated as league champions, and they won both the Berkshire and Western Mass titles. And they are running in a D3 divisional race this weekend. And the girls team finished the regular season also undefeated as league champions. They placed 4th in the Western Mass race and will compete in the D3 divisional race this weekend as well. Crew had a safe and productive season out on the water this year, and they competed very well. They rode in 5 regattas and had a strong showing in those. And golf finished 2nd in the Berkshire League after Wacona High School placed 1st in Division I Western Mass Championship, and they placed in the top half of all teams in the state championship. So overall, a pretty strong athletic season. And we know that it's been a challenge with some long commutes and those types of things as we play in these new leagues. But again, I think our kids stepped up and did a nice job this season. So we're very proud of them. Speaking of being proud, we don't just get it done in the field, but also in the classroom. We have 30 John and Abigail Adams Scholarship recipients. The John and Abigail Adams Scholarship provides provide students to go to college at any of our state schools for no tuition. They still have to pay room and board, but all in fees, but their tuition is covered by receiving the scholarship. So we'd like to say congratulations to Maxwell Adam, Ava Bachman, Cecilia Carey, Alex Del Vecchio, Tegan Demler, Liam Doherty, Peter Fiegel, Clifford Flynn, Andrea Fox, Ava Garlington, Talia Giardina, Frankie Page Guacchione, Nicholas Bouchard, Uriah Hernandez, Eli Hofelter, Noah Kirby, Allison Lamb, Hunter Lanning, Thomas Leger, Ella Lyon, Gabrielle Marino, Jack O'Brien, Devin Patel, Jay Patel, Rihanna Patel, Georgia Razor, Fernanda Reyes, Madeha Radzinski. Get that one right. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Arthur Schwartz and Alex Zabian. So again, to have 30 students qualify is a pretty significant achievement. So great job to those students. And again, not just getting it done in the class and on the stage, but also in the classroom.
What's the criteria? Is it related to MCAS?
Yeah, it's based on MCAS scores. And you have to finish in the top. I'd have to go back and check the actual percentage of the state, yeah, MCAS scores. And so again, not easy to accomplish because it's not just looking at the top half of your own school, but it's, comparison statewide. So again, our kids did great.
Yeah, it's pretty outstanding to have 30 kids in a class.
Yeah.
A class of 60 or so.
Yeah. So, and again, these are still kids who had to overcome and wrestle with, COVID and all of the, trappings that came along with that. So again, I think it's just a testament to their great determination. We also have some highlights from Morris. Certainly they don't want to be outdone by LMHS, and lots of great things at Morris. Tomorrow they have a wave parade to honor veterans. And so that'll be tomorrow morning at Morris. And then they also have some other important upcoming dates next week. On 11/15, grades close. And they also have a school council meeting that night from 5 to 6, and then a PTO meeting right after at 6:30. And also on the 15th, they're having a 50th day of school celebration, which is kind of neat. Oftentimes they have 100th day of school celebrations, but they broke it down into a smaller chunk and during the 50th day of school celebration. And the Spirit Day is asking students and faculty to dress up like students from the 50s. And so they're suggesting things like slick back hair, white t-shirts, poodle skirts, etc., or any other fun way that they can represent the number 50. And so they have a variety of ideas that students can find creative ways to demonstrate the number 50. So again, kudos to Brenda and her team for finding another way to just infuse a little bit of joy into the school year over there at Morris.
Yeah, I went to school in the 50s, and
Bring Bob
I
Vaughn.
might need to go down there and see what I look like.
So, feel free to raid Bob Vaughn's closet. He probably still holds on to a few of those things. Although I noticed that you've been wearing some new sweatshirts, so I don't know if you still have the old 50s gear hanging around. On the 17th over at Morris, there's a flu and COVID clinic for our staff. Again, a lot of appreciation to our county health departments and also our school nurses for working to bring this thing to fruition for us. I think it's really important to try to stay out ahead of the flu and COVID. And I think these clinics are a great way to, it's a great benefit for our staff, but it's right on site, it's convenient and free. So
Just a quick comment about that. I was really impressed how easy the process was to sign up to. Sometimes those are like check 40 boxes and fill out all this information, and it was very, very simple. So
Is that for anyone in the school community? So parents?
yeah, the one for
kids,
staff and
faculty,
also for students.
and families.
Yeah. And then we have a pre-K Thanksgiving celebration on November 21st. And Friendsgiving, which is an annual event at Morris on the 22nd. And then report cards are already here. They go home on the 28th. And we'll have parent conferences on November 30th and also on December the 2nd. So lots of things happening at Morris. A great chance to kind of get out and get involved. Brenda loves to have parents come visit the school, so people can make time to come out. We'd love to see folks. We also have 2 field trip requests.
Let me just highlight some recognitions.
Sure.
I noticed as I came in tonight that Shake and Co has the fall festival. And
Yes.
the Hamlet is being performed, I believe, here on the 12th. I may have the dates wrong.
Saturday the 12th at 7.
Saturday the 12th here, and then again at Shake and Co at the Tina Packer Theater on the 20th.
Yes, at noon.
Sunday at noon on the 20th.
what time on Saturday the 12th?
Saturday the 12th is 7 p.m. and Sunday the 20th is noon. And Shakespeare is requesting that you reserve tickets for the event there by calling or email, or calling or going on their website.
Yeah, the fall festival is pretty impressive on site.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, you get to see your own play here, but it's a pretty impressive
I love it. It's
event
great.
for Shakespearean performers. So, good luck to everyone in that. So anyway,
All right, thank you. And we have 2 field trip requests to share with the committee's approval because they're out-of-state trips. The first one is a French trip to Hudson, New York, and I believe that Sam Harb is on the remote list here, so I'm going to promote him.
do you want me to promote him if I can?
If you can, if not, I can promote him from over here. And
No,
this
I
was-
do not seem to have the ability to promote.
All right, I'll do it. And Sam, you should see a message pop up saying that you're being promoted to a panelist. All right. So Sam, if you can hear us and have the ability to speak to us from home, you should be able to share your trip request. Otherwise, I'll certainly do it in your stead.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so this is a yearly trip that I've been doing for the last 25 years. Every year we take, I used to take 8th graders to a French restaurant because we do an extended unit on food, and to introduce them to the French cuisine. And usually the staff, they speak in French and have a little workshop with the students in the restaurant. Since the pandemic hit, we had to pause that for a couple of years. So the last year we did it with the 10th and 11th grade. This year we're doing it with the 9th grade, and hopefully next year we'll be back on schedule to do it with the 8th graders. There is a cost to the students to do this. They have to pay their own lunch. And 20 years ago, the cost was $25. Now it's about $45 per student. I'll be happy to answer any question that you might have about the specifics of the trip.
I know we ask this typically with every field trip, but is there help available for students who might want to go? But
this question comes almost every single year that we talk about a field trip. And we only have one source that we can tap into, and that's the Walker Fund. Usually provides for the few students that may need assistance. I suggested about 7-8 years ago that the school committee somehow establishes an account specific for field trip financial help. And the account will be funded by donations from businesses and community members and whoever wants to donate. But that hasn't been done yet. So the only source we have is the Walker Fund.
We still have funds available on that. Does anyone know?
We usually have funds in that. I didn't check to see if we have enough funds for that. Last year, there were a couple of students that needed financial help to join us on that trip. And I was more than happy to pay their costs from my own pocket. And that worked out for them.
Okay.
That was very generous of you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so since this is out of state, we'll need a motion to approve the trip to Hudson to the French restaurant.
I move to approve the French field trip to the restaurant in Hudson, New York.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Harb.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right,
So-
and we have second field trip request, another trip to New York, but this time to New York City, for the humanities department. I don't see.
Dr. Weaver and Storyco asked me to talk about that.
Oh, perfect. All right.
So the humanities class, upper level course combining social studies and English, taught by Dr. Storyco and Dr. Weaver for quite some time. They take an annual trip every year to New York City. This year they are proposing, as part of the humanities curriculum, trip on Wednesday, May 24th, to visit the Museum of Modern Art, to see a Broadway production, and to take a self-guided architectural tour, which will relate directly to the humanities curriculum. We are also celebrating the end of humanities together at the Italian restaurant, Angelo's Pizza, after the play. Some details: the humanities department will cover the cost of the bus, the MoMA entrance fee, and tickets for the play. Students will be asked to be responsible for their lunch, estimated at $10 to $15, and dinner, estimated at $25. And a note, please note that students may either bring food for lunch on our visit, and the humanities department is prepared to supplement the food costs for any student requiring financial assistance.
And this has been a long standing, as Mr. Lee mentioned, even before Dr. Steranko and Weaver were teaching the course. This was it's been a long standing humanities event.
Yeah, we weren't able to hold it last year because of COVID. Some of these venues in New York City required proof of vaccination. So we didn't want to put kids in an awkward spot or have some kids not be able to go if they were not vaccinated. So they made alternate plans for a different trip last year, but they'd like to get back to doing this one.
Well, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the humanities trip to New York City as presented by Mr. Lee and written up by Mr. Steranko and Weaver as presented.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. And thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and the final item on my report is to ask Melissa Falkowski, our Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations, to offer a brief presentation on the school budget process, giving an update kind of where we are and what are some of the factors impacting the budget at this stage of the game as we look ahead to putting that together. So Melissa has a brief presentation. I'm going to share it from here, and then Melissa, you can just tell me when to advance the slides. Yes, my favorite thing.
And will people be able to hear you over there, Melissa? I wonder if we need you to come over. Please do. I thought you weren't going to.
I like the existential questions.
Here.
What happens next?
Oh. The whole chair just went back. It's like, I just want to look there, but it's like, it's weird.
It's going to be over there. Just give me a second. Take it away, Melissa.
Okay. Yeah, slideshow is better. So this is a brief overview of where we are right now with the 2024 budget process. We started this year a little bit earlier than last year to sort of get a good feel for where we sat with increases year over year and a final number earlier than we did last year. So where are we right now? We have distributed the budget documents to the principals and the directors, and they're currently working on their staffing charts and their preliminary budgets. The staffing charts are all the employees that are in their building, and they review current versus needs and recommend where we need to be for the next budget cycle. And the same with the preliminary budgets. It's a similar document to last year. We have historical information, we have 5-year averages, and then we ask for what is necessary in 2024, aside from the salaries, which is calculated in the business office. So the building principals and the student service director, tech director, all have their budgets and are diligently working on them. It's not smiling. So what happens next? Mark and I and perhaps Jake will be meeting with the principals and directors on December 8th. And during this meeting, we review what they're requesting, why they're requesting what they are, what's increased, why the increase, what's decreased, why the decrease, and just to get a feel for where they're coming from with their budget and what their needs are. So it's a conversation between the building administrators, the program administrators, and central administrators. After that, they'll revise based upon conversation there. We'll have final budgets that will be due December 14th. And those all come into the business office, and I sort of put them all together. Then we will take it at the administration, the central admin level, and review, analyze, and then finalize the initial 2024 budget that will be presented to the school committee on January 9th. So we'd like to have that finalized by December 22nd so that we can prepare electronic and some print copies for any who request print for that January 9th meeting. The next slide has our schedule so that you know what you'll be looking at on each date. So January 9th, we'll present a budget overview, which will give you sort of the bottom line figure, where we are in generalities for each department and what the bottom line number is compared to year over year last year. On January 23rd, the secondary budget will be presented, and that will be the middle and high school budget. On January 30th, elementary, student services, technology, and administration. That's the remaining 4 areas that will be presented. On February 13th, we'll bring forward the capital plan, which will include building-based requests, as well as district-based requests, similar to the security fobs that we are installing this year. On February 27th, the committee will deliberate the budget, and on March 13th, it'll be a public hearing and formal vote by the school committee. So that's a similar schedule as last year. So at this point in time, we know that we most likely will have some budget influences. And this list tells you where we are with our contracts, our unit contracts. So settled salary contracts, unit A was settled last year. So we're in the first year of a 3-year contract with the instructional teaching unit. And we settled with the custodial contract over the summer. So their salaries are set. We know what to put into the budget. You know, there are some variables, movement on the salary scale. We won't know that for a while yet. So that'll change the numbers for the instructional. And if a custodian, there is longevity now in their contract. So that's been added, but I'll be reviewing to see who may get it next year for the first year. So that will be something that I'll be looking at. And the only unsettled salary contract is the unit C, which are the support employees. There's 45 in that unit, and that includes the food service, which is a separate budget. They have their food service fund. It's outside of operating. So a couple of things that we're looking at, the OSD issued a 14% estimated inflation rate for service programs next year. That includes special ed, out of district programs, contracted services we may need, anything that falls under there. They're estimating a 14% increase in 2020, the 2024 budget.
So what's the OSD? What does that stand for?
Operational Services Division. So it's part of the Department of Labor and Standards and OSD, and they give, every year they have to give a percentage increase estimate of what they think will be impacting these programs. And this year it was at 14%, which is very high.
Past years.
Some years have been 2, some years have been 4, much lower. Yeah, so that's a high number. So we'll be continuing to look at that, but we really do. I've talked with other districts, they are budgeting for the 14%. What that means for us, for tuitions and services, looks like an additional 41,000 at this moment. I've calculated about 500,000, 479 in that area that will need a 14% bump. Other inflation trends, 2022, we've seen 7 to 8.1%. 2023, they're estimating up to 3.5%. The Federal Reserve is saying 2%. All other areas, experts, analysts are saying add 1.5 to that. So it's anywhere from 2 to 3.5% for 23. And then in 24, about a 2.3% average is being forecasted. So we are seeing some increases in products, and we're seeing them this year. Surcharges, increases in service costs and products, in shipping, just increases across the board. So we will, initial figures that I worked on in October, I included a 10%, which would incorporate this year plus the 2% for next year. For next year, but I'll keep looking at that and whittle it down to a good solid number that I think will be enough for next year. Our health insurance, we had an increase last year, but the increase was 8%. We also received a premium holiday, which offset the 8%. So in conversations with the town, because of the timing of the vote and where we were with the budget numbers, we left it flat because we did not actually see an increase because of the premium holiday. And a premium holiday means that the town doesn't pay their portion of the premiums and employees don't pay their portion. So it's 0 for 1 month out of the year. And so they zeroed each other out. So we kept it level. However, we can't do that this year because of the increase last year. So last year was 8%. And this year I'm estimating 5 to 6%. I'm hoping that it's much lower. But that will be the bulk of the increase in the budget for, of course, salaries, but also, non-salary items, fringe benefits. This is always the big number. So they vote, the Berkshire Health Group Board votes at the end of January for whatever increases they feel are necessary for the upcoming year, beginning July 1st. So if that comes out before the January 9th meeting, I can change those numbers fairly quickly. So, and I'll make sure to keep track of that to see where they're voting. Hopefully it's a low number and it's not in the 5 to 6% range.
Sorry, one question on the health insurance. Is my sense is even when our budget gets to town meeting, health insurance isn't in what's voted on as the school budget, right? Because it's controlled by the town. It's like the actual number that I'm just remembering, like last year, the town had to approve the 11 million number, not the 14 million number.
I think they approved the 14 million. I'd have to look at the warrant, but I believe that it's part of it.
They've been including that in recent years as part of our, and that's why when they've asked us to stay at 3%, it's included the health insurance, which has made it one of the years when there was no increase. That was great, but with an 8% increase.
Well, that's why I'm asking is that it was never clear to me why it was in, given that we have no, even when we're negotiating the contracts, the first thing we say is we don't, it's not up to us. We can't do anything about it. We don't set, it's just not actually part of our budget and we're not the ones who pay it. And cynically, I understand why we counted it in the last few years because it actually provided a very generous tailwind to our overall percentage growth. But just in the kind of way, I remember whenever I was trying to kind of true up the numbers, there was always like, okay, but does this one have health insurance in? Does this one have health insurance out? Is there any reason we don't just take it out? Like, can we just agree? I mean, obviously the warrant has to say whatever the warrant has to say, but if we have no control over the number and has no effect on our resources, our policy, can we just make an agreement as a committee that it's just going to be over there and whatever has to be done for the warrant, we will put that amount back on top?
We'd probably love to do that.
Is there any reason not to do that?
Well, for years, they would have a separate item on the town warrant for health insurance, and and there'd be a little parenthetical thing that would say so much for the school department and so much for the rest of the town.
Yeah.
And then a few years ago, and I'm thinking maybe a decade or more ago, they wanted to include everybody's health insurance in their budgets. And so that's, that's made it, as you said, when it's 0, it helps us. But, I'd love to have it be separate, because then you can show what the operating budget is. You can show what the health insurance is separately, but it's not something that the town has wanted us to do in recent years. And I can't tell you how many, but it's been quite a while. And they've gone back and forth over the years because they want the town meeting vote to reflect what's being spent on the schools, including that health insurance. And yeah, it would be great to have it removed.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, well, I guess there are two things. One, for our purposes, I still wonder if it would be helpful if we just all agree right now, just put that to the side. It just, it has no bearing on what we talk about. It only confuses us for that process between now and March.
Yeah.
So when I do the budget,
Yeah.
you'll notice if you look at last year's, it has a number. It has minus special revenues, a net number plus insurance. So that number that you're looking for is separate from the total.
Yeah, it's always available in there, but in
Right.
terms of which number someone is shouting out or talking about and which growth rate, it tends to be a mess. And in terms of what we will actually be deliberating about and trying to figure out for an excellent and well-managed school system, it's just irrelevant. So I guess I would sort of put to the committee, I would suggest that we all just agree we're talking about the operating budget. And if that then means we have to slap on some other number in the warrant, we do that. But I think both for our deliberations, that would be very helpful. And then the second point is for whatever the arguments are going to be this year about what the percentage should be, which are going to be doubly crazy with inflation and a 10 to 13% health number. I don't see how it would be constructive as we discuss how to build a responsible budget to be addressing that. If we have to get up in front of the town and say, look, this number is higher because every single department has this health insurance thing, but here's what our budget is, then I think we would feel very good about doing that. But that seems to me it's up to us to decide. So I think it'd be really useful upfront to decide that rather than at every meeting having to say, well, the percentage is this, but don't forget if you take out healthcare, it's actually this, and then we go back and and so on and so forth.
Are there any specific cons to doing that?
Taking it out?
Yeah.
No.
And I think it's not like we're ignoring it. You're just saying,
Yeah.
put that over here
Yeah,
because that's nothing we
right.
can control or that we're in charge of. And when it comes to town meeting, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
So when,
Megan.
So
we're
it's
looking
really-
at, when the different departments are presenting their budgets to us, is there health insurance in that?
No.
All right, because that's what I always look at. I mean, I always look at it as that, that's kind of what we're in a way, focusing on is actually that cost, that change per year.
Is there any particular reason why this has been difficult to do so far? I mean, like, it seems like we could easily reach agreement within this group here, but I don't know if there are other groups that would have to, that are influencing the way it's displayed, I guess is my question.
So I have conversations with the town and with the town manager and the accountant. And when I first arrived here a few years ago, it was a 3% number. And I said, I think I can get there. I was all excited. And then when I presented, I showed the town manager, he said, where's the benefits? I can't get there with the benefits. But so yes, it's more clear cut when you don't have them in there, but the number. And that number is something that I discuss with the accountant because he knows how many retirees we have and we keep track of it throughout the year. So I just make sure that we're on the same page. And you always have to add a little bit to it in case someone loses their insurance from their spouse's plan somewhere during the year. So we always have a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 policies in there just in case to cover that expense. But that's a decision that I work with the town employees on. So if you want it separate, it can easily be separate and then added in for the town warrant. That's not an issue on my end.
See, I want the best of both worlds. I can leave it out and not have it in the warranty store.
Well, and also
So-
maybe just keep going with the conversation. The reality is, if in the past it was this and this represents this, I mean, the benefits, we look at equity in the town, everybody gets benefits. So we can say how it's broken up if people want to get into the weeds to know expert. I mean, we all also know the school department is the largest employer of the town. I mean, that's not a secret, but I like the idea of at least advocating for having that separate health insurance warrant. We've been having separate conversations about OPEB forever and, you know, needing to fund that. And I think that has made a lot of sense to have that conversation. So maybe we just keep at it. But I think for our purposes, I like the suggestion too.
I mean, OPEB is something different though. I mean, OPEB
No, I know that. I'm just saying that,
But
you know,
exactly right. That's also a cost of the schools, but no
Right.
one tries to put that into our.
Let's
I
not
think
give them new ideas because
yeah.
that was happening in the past.
Well,
We
yeah,
had that fight.
but to Melissa's point, I think it's helpful to, you know, at the bottom of the sheet, have it in there so we know what it is. But I think if we all agree that which number we're talking about and referring to, the other one, I think will be.
Bob, in your presentation, do you separate that out typically? Do
They
you go
haven't.
through the costs in general?
They haven't wanted that. They've wanted a, you know, our bottom line number.
Yeah,
So
a single line. So we're not even separating out as
and
part of
they-
the presentation.
Well, because, you know, since Mr. Ketch's been town manager, he's put the school department in as a, you know, just another department. Now, last year, I believe the selectmen wanted us to be separated from all the other, you know, town departments. So I think last year it was a separate article for the school. And, you know, I would have no problem having two separate articles for the school. You know, I think that goes back to an earlier era when that was the norm. You know, when health insurance started climbing dramatically in the late 90s. And at some point, the finance committee and selectmen wanted it all to be merged and wanted the increase to be based on everything. And you know, the health insurance has been so up and down. I mean, Melissa's been part of this in other districts and here for quite a few years. 0, 0, 0, 0, 8, 10, 0, 0, 0, 5, you know, whatever. It's never been like add 1 or 2% every year and make it, you know, make it work. So it becomes a real crapshoot for us.
Yeah, but well, and I think to David's question, we get to deliver our presentation however we want. So we can get up and say, the warrant says whatever the number is, which is whatever that percent is. In doing the budgeting, here's what we're actually looking at. It is a X% in our budget. Health insurance, as is for everybody else, is up this much. And you know, the trade-off that presents, it would always be open to the town to say, benefits are climbing so quickly, we need to actually cut school spending to cover those benefits costs. So someone is welcome to make that argument if they want, but they should be forced to make that argument, not just look at the overall number.
And the town does have an OPEB fund that's funded. And I don't know what the terms are because when you create one, you have to say when you can start using it. And it may not be for years.
It won't be for years.
But that could also offset the retiree portion of the benefits for all departments for the whole town when it gets to that point. But I think that's a few years in the future.
I used to be on the finance committee back a decade or more ago. And at the time we were just starting the OPEB discussion. And we've been funding it generously. Lenox has been funding it generously, probably more than any other town in the Berkshires. And yet it will be 30 more years before it's fully funded. And the idea is that once you've got the trust fund funded, then the income from that will be what pays the benefits for retired employees.
Right. It's like endowment.
But it will take a long time to get there. At the time, the town was looking at doing the same thing with the town employees through the, I don't know where the money goes to, but through the Berkshire County retirement. And they had, at the time, felt that they were going to have that fully funded by about now. I mean, I don't know whether they have or not. I don't know what those numbers really look like for the town employees, but they were talking about trying to get that funded by 2022, 23, 24, somewhere, you know, somewhere right around now. I don't know if that's happened or not.
The assessment last year was higher than the year before, so they are still assessing to try to get there. But I think they're very close.
Yeah. So, but no, I think it's a great idea.
So we're agreed, we're gonna ask Melissa to take the health insurance portion out of our presentations at least.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. And the last item is a,
I'm sorry, but I apologize. It just made me sort of think, what else, such as health insurance, is there that we do not have any control over that may also be considered in that aggregate portion of the budget presentation? Whether perhaps there isn't any, but just to follow this line of thought, should there be any, please bring it to our attention, I guess.
yeah, there isn't any besides the health insurance. So the town does pay for vocational tuition, and that's an educational expense, but not on the school department. We pay for vocational transportation. The town is assessed the school choice assessments. The school department receives the revenue. So everything else is fairly separate, but the health insurance was not. And then the last item, of course, well, vacancies in administrative positions. We have the superintendent search that will be ongoing in a month or so, and the principal search for LMMHS. Those are two key positions with higher salaries that may impact the budget next year. And then, of course, we have our revenue sources that we use to offset the operating budget. When we're calculating the budget, we come up with a gross number, what it costs to run the district aside from grants. Then we take what we anticipate our revenues to be in school choice, other tuition receipts, circuit breaker, pre-K tuition, and the smaller funds like the Duffin Theater, outside community use of buildings, and athletics, and see what those accounts look like, where we anticipate we'll end for the year, and how much of that we can safely use to offset the operating portion of the budget. And that's what this chart is doing. So the anticipated available revenue, it's early, and these numbers most likely will change, especially school choice. That gets adjusted in December, so we may see it go down from what we're receiving monthly now, or we could see it go up. And so this number may change a little bit, but these are the anticipated numbers. It's slightly less than last year's offset, which was 1.78 million. This is 1.77. So it's about an $11,000 difference. One area that most likely will be increased are the tuition receipts. And those we receive from our tuition students in Richmond, and any that come in from other districts that want a program that we offer. The only ones we have currently are Richmond students, and that is that tuition this year is $11,000 per student. So I'm estimating about 88,000, but I don't have any new students added to that. So it could be higher. We could have had one or two drop off, but I'll get those final numbers and adjust that 50,000 most likely upwards a bit. So that'll help with the offset to the gross budget.
Could I, oh, sorry. Can I ask for something? And it goes to a conversation we've been having a lot, and I don't want to, I'm not trying to make busy work for anyone, but I think this is really important. And since building administrators are working on this, can we come up with an approximate list of all the items where families, students need to spend money? And I don't know exactly, so there's, I just know off the top of my head, for example, athletics is on there. So you have athletic fees. There may be field trips. There may be, I don't know, but I think it'd be helpful, and I'm happy to join with anyone or do some legwork if I need to, but to have a comprehensive list of all the ways that we ask families to chip in money so that we know. I think that there's this like, oh, but if we just absorb some of these fees, it would be disastrous, but maybe it really actually wouldn't. And I really think it'd be helpful to know what that is, because I think about the families who, including, for example, picture day, or, anything where a family needs to write a check, and I know we have some limits on like athletic fees for your signups, but there's still 3 times a year, you gotta go and you gotta write the checks. And I just think it'd be really helpful to know what that is, because when we think about equity, we think about, oh, well, we cover the students through this fund or that fund. At some point, every single time someone has to ask for help, I think that has an impact too. And if we're really saying we're an inclusive school for all, if it costs a little bit more for these programs to be included, maybe it would actually be better in a lot of ways to do that. And I don't know, because I don't know what the number is. And I know there are lots of ways we're trying to think about it, but if we, sort of had every single student has to pay something. Oh, gee, the only students for field trips have to pay something. There's sort of there's a way that I think we need to get a handle on what that is.
I want to get all the way down to like school supply levels. I mean, because there are districts that, don't even allow families, I mean, not they don't allow them, but they strongly discourage them from sending in supplies. And they say like, we'll give your kids, folders, we'll give them these things like, so I guess where do we want to draw that line, I guess would be the question.
I mean, I think at least initially, because I don't think I think a lot of these numbers are either don't show up in our budget at all because it's a family sign up and someone chooses who to do the photographs for or whatever, to things that show up in our budget, such as the athletic fees. And I think it'd just be helpful to try to have a menu in a way. I think when it comes to school supplies, there's a lot of discretion around that. And I think that would get into what families spend, what people do. I know for teachers, probably in their budget, or some of them very kindly take it out of their pocket and they make sure they have boxes of pencils. Some teachers are great about saying, hey, instead of giving me, an apple or whatever, could you send in a box of pencils? About every family send in a box of tissues, a box of pencils.
Well, we had
And that
Mr.
gives
Carr today as a prime example.
Yeah.
Telling us
that he put it out of his own pocket. So I think, I just feel like we don't really know what that number constitutes. And I don't want to make busy work for anybody, but I do think it's important. I think the stuff that happens sort of, you got to go buy supplies is a little iffy. There are a lot of places that have, backpacks stuffed. And I would love to see us get to a place where there isn't a lot of inequity with students when it comes to supplies. I don't personally know the answer to that. My anecdotal information is that teachers kind of cover that by asking for families that, bring one and an extra one for someone else in a way that's very kind of just goes into the supply closet and doesn't really show up. Hopefully that's true. I mean, it's been a while since I've had one at Morris School, but that's what we would do. Like if you can bring an extra box of pencils, then we share them with everyone. And that's a nice way to do it. But there are lots of places in which we know there's going to be a collection of checks,
So you're talking about more like, for lack of a better term, maybe like extracurriculars and other like program adjacent like costs.
I know, for example, like I have 3 kids in Morris. My oldest is playing an instrument this year. So that's expensive.
Yeah, sure.
I was actually really surprised how expensive it was. But
we should talk after.
Okay. I think it kind of ties into, my question about, I've never heard of the Walker Fund before. I know that was what was mentioned about the French field trip.
I don't know how funded it is right now.
It doesn't sound like it's very funded, and it might lead to a good discussion about how we as a school committee can help promote that, promote, donations. I know a lot of people in town will do like in lieu of flowers when someone passes away. Maybe that's of interest. I don't think a lot of people know that exists. So if we could do a better job of just kind of getting it out there, advertising it, that sounds cheesy, but you know what I mean? Like, there's ways that we could make sure that that fund is always.
And we have LEAF, but like the problem with LEAF is that, there's a lot of hoops to jump through, but other districts, Green Bay, like actually a couple of these too, is they have their own foundations that they establish. So we've got the Lenox Foundation, and then we could get those donations and then create micro grants back out to people to cover those kinds of things, right? And so, and that would give people a place to put their money. So like they know, like, all right, I want to do this, here's where it goes, and this is how it gets used. Because I find lots of times people want to give, they just don't know how, you know, or they don't know like where it go, what it's going to go to. And so they'll say like, well, we want to help, but no one's ever asked, or we don't know what to donate.
And I think that's why I'd love to advertise it and just get the word out there that this fund is available. I think there are a lot of very generous families in town and maybe not in town who would, like to contribute to that. And if we explain the purpose of the fund, give some examples on what it's used for. I didn't mean to take
Yeah.
over your question,
No,
but
no,
it kind
no.
of goes, you
That's
know,
okay.
kind of
We were
ties
talking about it.
together.
And just for quick background, so Dr. Walker was a principal at LMMHS and he retired and he had been a principal, I think, for about 25 years. I'm looking at Bob as the
He was
institution
here quite a while. He
historian.
was here before.
And I was on the school council at the time that he was retiring. And there was a conversation about people wanting to honor him. And he was very modest and didn't want gifts and things. So we said, what if we? And we recognized this same problem about kids not being able to pay for things and how can we make that easier? Faculty often talked about being aware of a student with a need and not wanting to embarrass the family. And so this fund was created and named after Dr. Walker in appreciation for his years of service at Lenox. I was on the school council, we did a big fundraiser, we got some checks, we were asking parents, we put a line on everything you signed up for. Can you add, you know, like sponsor one or add $5? And we had a line item that was actually, this will go into the Walker Fund. And I don't know where that's happened or if anybody's taken, you know, sometimes it's a person retired maybe that had previously taken ownership of it. And it was in honor of his length of service and a lot of people that really wanted to do something for him and he didn't want it to be personal to him. So very appreciated.
Do we know who manages that fund now?
It's not a fund that is a central office. It's here at this building. Is it part of a sub fund of student activities?
No, I think it's even independent of that.
Yeah.
It's an individual account that's supposed to be monitored by the principal, I believe.
So we can get an
I
update
don't
on.
think it's part of the school budget. I think it's an independent account.
If it was a PTO, it probably was the PTO account or a school council account. And when things changed over, probably gave it to the control of the principal.
Sure, that we,
You know,
we can change that. I just, because we've had this exact conversation over a period of years, like, like everything you just said, I think we said the exact same thing 5 years ago and nothing has changed. And I think it's because if it's belonging to, you know, who knows, or there's been turnover and we aren't able to actually isolate, like, we don't even actually know how much money is in the account. Like, no one in this room can answer.
Yeah, it seems like it belongs in our wheelhouse.
I'm not sure what the logistics would be, but to relocate it so we actually have central oversight. That seems to be step one, and then we could actually, then we understand what's in it, and then we could figure out how to publicize and get more money in there. Because this is the wheel just keeps turning and nothing's changing.
And I've always thought there could be a tab on, you know, on our website. How to, you know, ways to contribute to the school.
It needs to be made
the
very
Walker
easy.
Fund could have a little explanation and a way of contributing.
It's something literally,
I think it's in the wrong place.
press the button, donate the money. I mean, it's a very easy.
Yeah, there's more we could be doing, I think, collectively.
And as
boost that
Christine
up.
said, we've been talking about this
Well, it's regrettable.
for a while,
Like
and it's just getting the mechanism in place and advertising, because the Walker Fund can help, you know, in this situation, help kids at high school, but it's, you know, this is where largely the expenses, these extra field trip expenses and things come up here.
Does that trickle down to Morris? Is Morris eligible to use that?
It's really only been something that existed here.
So yeah, I think, I don't know, I guess it started off as a suggestion, but I feel pretty strongly that that kind of should lie with us, and we could be doing a lot more.
But who actually is it? Melissa, is this something you can actually look into?
Yeah, Tim, I'll give you a call and we can talk about it tomorrow. So the schools do have what we call miscellaneous revolving funds. And some are donations for particular purposes. Some are, you know, like some schools have vending machines and then the money goes into a fund. So Morris has a set, LMMHS has a set, and each one is, there's a miscellaneous general, can be used for most things. And then there are many that have specific purposes. And so when the principal calls and says, I need the money for this, what do you suggest? You know, if it's something oddball like that, you know, I need to buy lunch for this group that's going here. That's where I point them to and say, this is what we have in these funds. Tell me which one you want it to come from. And so there is access to money outside of the operating budget for things like this.
Yeah, I just think that the select board, who on almost all of their agendas is, you know, accepting donations for the police or the fire department, or that's usually kind of like a standing item on their agendas. So could be something similar.
Can I, it makes you think of two things. It makes you think of, it would be great to have some Lenox merch out there where, as for people who donate to whatever causes, whether it be radios or whatever, there's always, you hit a level, you get a Lenox millionaire mug, you get a shirt, you get, something along those lines, which would also sort of go to school spirit. But on a much smaller hands-on level, I think of all of the kids who've been through Mighty Kickers, right? And how many people have cleats and shin pads or have like a saxophone or clarinet or a trumpet, and all of those people, that maybe they didn't go on to play soccer. It would be, and this may be a PTO or a school council thing, but it would be great to have a place where these things that are so lightly used are donated to the school for redistribution for anyone who wants to use it, as opposed to, say, donating them someplace else. It's much smaller, but it's a real hands-on thing where people don't have to qualify, they don't have to, they can just,
That's a great
go
idea.
and get it. Anyway.
So, and I think all the ideas are great. And I think the fundraising is great. I also think when we think about equity and inclusion, if we have a budget that has a lot of things that come back to the families, but we'll help you if you need it, the question becomes, how often what is the impact of the, hey, we're a family who needs it? And what does that actually do in our culture? If we're saying we're inclusive and we're all, and if we're talking about numbers that are not particularly big, or, and if they're big, then we need to know, like, do we really believe in music for all? Well, music for all, what does that look like? And so I think my big issue is I can't make the pitch for what, and us to think about whether that's a stretch or not a stretch or something to do later, or however we're going to do it if we don't really have a handle on the numbers. And
I'm happy to help you with that.
I mean,
I know
just kind of brainstorming about
Yep.
what's out there, and maybe we could work a little bit with school councils about that. Or I don't want to put agendas on people who already have a big workload, but I just think I just don't feel like we even really know.
Yeah, I'm
I
happy
think
to help.
that's the school. I think it has to be a real low down level like school councils, because you don't know half the stuff they're charging for. You don't know when.
Well, as a parent,
Well, the parents know. That's
yeah.
what I mean, the head of central office.
The one that I know about is athletics.
Yeah.
Because we use that fund to help offset the expenses of all the programs. So that fund pays for refs and, some supplies and some contracted services and things like that. And then the operating budget pays for the coaches and pays for the transportation. And so we keep, what gets paid where separate, but that's the big one.
Yeah. And even that one
that
doesn't
I
show
know.
like the booster stuff that people are asked.
Yeah.
Pulling up for jacket.
But we have $15,000 in revenue. So one thing that we could do, I'm not saying we do it, it's too early in the stage, could be, let's stop counting $15,000 of revenue and build that into offsetting. In a way it's already offsetting, right? It's coming in here and it's going out there. So it is, but I think the fact that we get that money from families signing up is something we just have to think about. I'm not saying we make a decision yet.
A good bulk of it is gate receipts.
Okay.
So before we entered this league that we're in now, gate receipts were much higher than they are because the visiting teams are far away and they don't bring as many people because it's a longer drive. So, but gate receipts are a big part of it, along with the student fees to participate.
Okay. And I didn't want to hijack things, but I just think it's something I think is information we need would be helpful to know.
And if a student is free, qualifies for free or reduced lunches, they are not, the fee is charged accordingly, 0 or reduced.
Yeah. Oftentimes the families have to identify as that. They have to self-identify. And again, that's just I hear you. And I think it'd be helpful to know. Anyway, I don't want to.
Yeah, they wouldn't have to though, because the verification process is now streamlined with the state. Okay. So they wouldn't have to. So the list it's confidential, but certain administrators have access to that, and an athletic director would know that the coach would not collect a check from this family.
That's all.
You
Am I done?
your report? All right.
Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you.
one
Thank you
more
so much.
question on the extra numbers here. Melissa, you mentioned numbers are down a little. I had assumed that because of the influx of school choice kids this year, school choice number for next year's budget would be like 150K, like a big chunk. So why isn't it?
So what I do when I come up with that number is I see where we ended the year, what we've committed in the 23 budget, because we're working on that. So that will be gone. And then what we're currently collecting and what I anticipate we'll collect. It's not the full boat. So if we get 1.8 million, I don't include 1.8 million as an offset, because there could be expenses that come up that we don't know about. And school choice could be an area. So about 100,000 minimally should be kept in that fund for year over year, because if our numbers drop, it'll be like this. So it's better on a level to keep it level, because that keeps the bottom line level. So if we have a lot of money and you put it in there, and next year we have less, and then we're dipping down again. So it's always going to be like this. And that's the biggest number that impacts the bottom line. So it should sort of be maybe a little bit like this, a little bit like this, but kind of stay level so that we're not seeing valleys and mountains.
But I think I had the same thought that that number could be higher than what it is. Whatever that delta is, I don't know, but it could be higher because of the students.
And it may be.
Yeah.
I want to get to December
Yeah.
and see what that number looks like.
Okay. Two people.
Yes.
Is there any inflation adjustment in those numbers?
In these numbers?
Yeah.
No. These numbers are based upon what's in the revenue funds currently and what we anticipate to receive this year. So this is a revenue offset. We are not increasing student fees this year. It hasn't been requested, at least yet. Circuit breaker is an exact number that we'll spend next year. We get it this year, we spend it next year. So maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, but what I
maybe I didn't make. I'm not understanding the answer at any rate. So, like Duff and Theater, I was assuming that meant that you were projecting based on what we took in this year, what the revenues would be for next year.
Yes,
Are we thinking we might raise the rates for next year and get a little more revenue?
I have not had any conversations to that effect for the deafened. Oh, so we end fiscal year 22. I'll just give an example with 5,000. We anticipate to collect, and 2,000 is budgeted in 23. So now we're at 3. We anticipate to collect 10,000. So I anticipate ending 23 with 13,000. And I'm just picking numbers. So then I look at that and say, okay, for 24's budget, I anticipate we're going to end the year with 13,000 in this fund. How much do we feel comfortable offsetting with to leave a balance in there so that if he, the theater needs supplies or something that he forgot about, didn't budget, I can't find, then we have something in there. So that's the way that process, we have an end of year number, a start of year number, anticipated revenue, next end of year ending number that we will use to offset the next year's budget.
Okay, didn't understand any of that. That's okay.
So
keep going. I don't really
okay, it's easier with circuit breaker. Circuit breaker is a reimbursement that we get for expenditures that we have in special ed. In 23, we are going to, this year, we're going to receive $76,240. That money will directly be utilized to reduce special ed expenditures in the 24 budget. So you want to look at the previous year and what you have in there and offset with either, that has to be spent in 1 year, something like that, you use the whole thing. If it doesn't, you want to make sure that athletics can't start with a zero balance, the athletics fund, because come September, we're going to have expenses.
Well, this
that
is
are-
revenue though. So.
But it offsets, so I can't take, so the revenue of, I'm sorry, so the revenue of athletics,
Mhm.
user fees, gate receipts comes in. There has to be enough in there to start the year next year so that he has funding in there for whatever cost he has before he gets gate receipts or user fees in-house.
That's his budget. Isn't it?
Can I ask the
No,
question a little
that's-
Yeah, so
differently?
that's why I'm.
Yeah.
confused.
So it seems like, Melissa, I think I understand what you're saying is that the numbers that you're presenting here aren't actually cash in. They're what we're recognizing as revenue for accounting purposes.
What we're anticipating to have available to use at the end of this year for next year's budget.
Right, but in other words, regardless, the dollar amount in the budget is not the amount of cash that will enter the Lenox district's account during the year. It's what we choose to realize as our revenue during the year.
So we will have revenue. This is what we're anticipating to use out of that revenue. So it's not always dollar for dollar.
Okay, that helped me actually. I think I got that one.
Good, I'm getting there. I'm sorry. But so it's not dollar for dollar. So you get the revenue in and you look at where you are, what you anticipate for expenditures out of that fund and say, okay, I can use this in addition to offset the operating budget in athletics for
So-
uniforms.
For $15,000. You're saying, I think I need $15,000 more to make this work for next year.
Right.
It has nothing to do with how much is getting paid at the gate, other than you're thinking.
Other
at least
than
much.
that, keeps the account healthy.
Yeah,
So that we can
okay.
continue to do this.
Okay. I was thinking more like
Yeah, we don't
cash
spend,
revenue at the, you know.
yeah, we don't spend down every account.
You know,
Okay. I think I got it. Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Okay, moving on.
thank you for yours.
Principal search. So we'll talk about the interim principal search. Veronica and I have put together a team of 10 people who will begin. We're going to have an initial meeting next Monday to talk about the process, to begin to review candidates' resumes that have come in. The application period is not closed. More may be coming in. It's been slow. It hasn't been like they're pouring in, but we have some.
Sorry, can you clarify who's because I saw something go out for the search committee for the principal, but who is the group of 10 for the interim principal?
Veronica and I selected a couple parents, a couple administrators, 3 teachers, 2 or 3 teachers. I think this guidance, Tara Romeo, Ben Weaver, Sarah Hamilton, so we some teachers from the high school, a couple of administrators, a couple of parents, and ourselves, and it seems we use one other person, a community person, maybe. So a smaller group than what I think was used in the high school search, kind of a.
And smaller than what will be used in the high school search for the permanent principal. This is just for the process to find an interim.
Yeah, this is, and the full principal search will be, there's a lot of people who indicated an interest, and that will be a lottery to pick those. We just, because this is a shorter term interim, we're going with a.
Can you have just a comment on that? I'm very concerned that the process seems to be valuing very large groups for the sake of everyone feeling like there's a large group over the size of the committee that would actually most effectively choose the best person, which should be the goal of the process. I mean, for the interim, just contrasting with what we did for the interim superintendent, which was none of this. I'm not sure, maybe it's standard to stand up an entire search committee for an interim principal, but it strikes me as not well correlated with the actual goal of quickly identifying someone who will do a good job for us for the rest of the year. And I worry more so about, I think based on the email, it would have been a 17-person committee for the full-time principal search. So we can come back to that if we just want to talk interim now. But it's not clear to me how committees of this size serve the actual task of identifying and selecting the best person for the role in an efficient manner.
Can I ask in a different way? Maybe, I guess, curious as to how that decision came about to kind of do it that way, especially since we were, the three of us have been kind of working as the HR subcommittee. That's a pretty big committee. I agree with Thorin on that.
Well, except I hear you, except I think that there was a lot of conversation about, and my understanding was that the three of us agreed, and we asked that Bob and I work with Mark, because it's, as a superintendent, it's the superintendent's decision.
Yeah.
And Mark has been working very collaboratively with us, saying, okay, here's where we are, here's what I'm getting, because we expect, and we now have voted on, that there'll be a transition at the same time that we're doing this. And there has been communication with various people, including Bob and me, and I think other school committee members, of people who want to give some input in this this short-term decision for an interim. And so we looked at a very small group representing people who are concerned about what's happening within this building, to move things forward, to help provide some stability and some leadership, support Tim's work, and do a smooth transition about that. And so we brought together a group of people to help us give input, and then we're going to make a recommendation, and whichever superintendent is in place at the time, we'll do that hire, because that's legal, their requirement. We're not looking to protract it. And as far as, like, your opinion about it, about what's the best process, I appreciate that that's your opinion, and I may not be an expert on that either. I feel that I've been in many different places of a lot of criticism, including some misunderstanding of processes, because everybody is kind of heightened right now, and everybody's like, well, what's going to happen if we do this, and what's going to happen if we do that? And I do think that some stakeholder input and some communication and some opportunity to have the conversation and give some input while we make this decision is helpful. It will be abbreviated, and I think we will come to a position of making a good decision about an interim person. There aren't a ton of people coming out of the woodwork. It's a pretty small group. And that separate part of finding a permanent principal, that larger stakeholder, and again, like you said, you want to address that after, so we can, but I feel there's a lot to stakeholder input. And then there's somebody whose job it is to make the decision, whether it's the superintendent, whether in our case as a school committee, we have to hire a person. People want to be able to feel like they're being heard in this process. And I think most districts do some type of a stakeholder communication. There's different ways to do it. We're talking about a community forum in the superintendent sense, because everybody can't be at every decision, but I think it's helpful to get the input. We have a very abbreviated plan for it. And then we're going to be making the recommendation to, like I said, if it's Mark or if it's Jake, then hopefully there'll be a good, all the questions will be answered and we'll make a good decision. So
Oren mentioned it sounded like there were 17 people. Have you?
No, not for us. Oh,
no, that's for the full. That's for the full search.
So how many people do you have a rough estimate of how many people have expressed interest in?
40 to 50.
No,
For the
interim?
For the,
no.
the interim, no.
So
No, I'm just talking about interim.
The interim,
like
we just
8 or
selected-
9, 8 people.
We
plus
just asked some people
Bob
to
and
be
me.
part of it. Listen, we wanted to have, there's a lot of interest from the high school people to be part of the process. So we selected a couple of administrators, guidance person, and a couple of teachers to be part of that, and then a couple of parents, the two of us, and one other person in the station right now who that is. But it's important, and we felt it was important because we have an interim, or we have an assistant principal right now. We have an interim principal who won't be able to be with us for the full year, and we thought it was important that we be getting feedback from the faculty who will be working here to be part of the process in interviewing the candidates. We don't have a lot of candidates, and we're hopeful that sometime in early December we'll be able to do the interviewing and have a recommendation, for the superintendent to, then it may be Jake, it may be Mark. We don't know exactly the timing that this will happen in. As far as the full one goes, all we've done so far is ask Mark to solicit names for the broader committee, because ultimately it's going to be, a process that will be driven by Jake. But we just decided we should at least begin to get names of people interested in being part of the broader committee.
Yeah. Well, I think Mark's email defined who it at least was looking for to be on the committee. So,
and similar to what happened last spring.
Yes. Yeah. No. And certainly my understanding that you, Ronnie, and Bob were leading the interim process, and that the superintendent will lead the full-time process. I just wanted to give my feedback that, particularly as we sort of do a post-mortem on our recent spate of searches, and ask ways that we can do better. I think having a committee designed for the purpose of making the best choice and not for the purpose of sort of making everyone feel heard, if that the process doesn't actually lead to a better choice, is just, I hope, something we'll keep in mind. Well, a 17-person.
I hear what you're saying. Ronnie and I could probably pick somebody without any input. I think we would be roundly criticized.
That's what we did.
Welcome to public.
Well, right.
But that's what we did for the interim superintendent. So I guess that's just why I'm asking the discrepancy there.
No, but I think even in the interim superintendent one, I think the anticipation was with the three people that we identified that potentially there would have been some interviewing and so on that would have gone on. On an interim, I think what we're feeling is this is a very important position that we're filling. We're not going to have Mr. Lee for the full year, and we want to get a good person in.
No, that's terrific.
And that's our goal. We're including some other people in the process.
Okay. I just want to distinguish between what I just heard both you and Ronnie say. The justification for the way the committee is structured was not, we think this is going to lead to a better decision. It was, we think a lot of people want to feel heard, and it was, we're worried we would be criticized. And those don't strike me as the right way to design a committee.
Well,
we're trying to find.
And I just want to say from it though, because I think there's a yes and there. I don't know how you create community where you have people who are working together in concert without hearing what community has to say. At the same time, I think you have to have strong leaders who are also willing to say, I think this is the best person, but you can get input from people. You can get what it is we're looking for in leadership. You're saying you don't think that's the best way to get it. I'm saying I think it is the best way to get it. In the end, I think there's a lot of different things that make leadership. People come into an organization and maybe they promise a lot and they don't deliver. Maybe they are not the person we thought they were. But sometimes one of the things I found really beneficial from being part of several different searches like this is that I bring a certain set of skills and viewpoints and things and what I like to see and what I look for. And Christine has something different that she sees and looks for. And you have something different that you see and look for. So when we do that collectively, the hope is we're getting somebody that can work through differing points of view. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about how do we work through hard topics? How is it, do we come to some resolution or decision-making, or maybe a decision not to agree about something if we don't have discourse and communication? So I believe in inclusive processes. That's no shock. I'm pretty open about that. I believe that we have a community that wants that. And that's part of a hallmark of a smaller district like Lenox, is that people do feel a sense of being seen, heard, and a sense of belonging. I think that's important. And I just don't see them as a mutually exclusive. I think you can have people be heard and you can come to a good decision. That's our goal.
Can I get a clarification? Because I haven't heard, is the either as part of the decision process for the interim superintendent, will our current superintendent, whomever that may be part of this committee and be involved in it?
Wait, did you mean interim principal or
interim principal?
We got a lot going on. Yes, in a consultation way though, but we're kind of handling the process.
Yeah.
But I mean, part of the interview process, part of the screening process.
You know, I spoke to Mr. Lee this morning, and he's willing to help us craft questions, outline some of the critical things going forward. You know, that this interim would need to know to keep the, you know, keep the school running well, and build on what he's been creating with David Pugh.
And how about the superintendent? Because the superintendent hires.
Right.
Superintendent hires.
Right, and we have been working with Mark on this process.
Working with means what? I mean, is he intimately involved in the process? I mean, because I would assume a superintendent is going to have questions pertaining, you know, that I would think, since it's a superintendent's hire, superintendent is going to have pointed questions that perhaps others may not.
Mark has been part of the process, you know, soliciting resumes from folks.
Talking with us about it, and then talking about us about this process, this next process that we're doing.
And we don't know, you know, we don't know precisely when the interview is going to take place.
Right.
And so we're anticipating it might be taking place while Mark is still here, and or the decision might be made when Jake's just arriving. We're anticipating it's going to be done sometime in those first 2 weeks of December. We don't have, you know, we're just meeting with people on Monday to talk about the process further.
So are we presenting whomever the superintendent is with, these are our finalists? Or, I mean, I'm still not getting a sense that about how involved the superintendent is in the process. It seems like he's kind of around the edges.
He is to some extent, because the committee asked Veronica and me to take the role in this, because there was some belief of the committee's part that the decision should not be ultimately made unless, you know, by our current superintendent. And so the committee asked us to lead the process.
And also our current superintendent might not be here when it's time to make that decision. So if you know, we're trying to keep the variables stable, because we're going to be here and the people on the committee are going to be here, and then when it's time to make the hire, it will be the then superintendent making the hire.
I guess what I'm having trouble processing is the fact that regardless of, well, the variable absolutely is the hire, but the talents and the knowledge that a superintendent has and the expectations of that superintendent for a principal seems to be missing from the process.
It's not missing from the process.
Yeah. We've had two discussions.
Had conversations about the qualifications of the people that have come in, conversations about who's going to be interviewed, and then there's going to be an interview at some point. We just don't know who's going to be at the interview, because we don't know which superintendent is going to be there when we do it.
Well, shouldn't we just be working with whom we have at the time?
We are.
Okay, all right. So
we are working with Mark.
Our current superintendent could be interviewing candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes. I'm sorry, I did not get, that was not clear to me. I apologize.
And if we move fast enough, you know, I'm more than, you know, happy to do that. And I think you bring up a really important point. I think it is crucially important to have superintendent involved, because I do think that, you know, this isn't a popularity contest. There's also a technical skill set that you have to have to do this job well. And if you don't have that, you might win the popularity contest, but that popularity will evaporate very quickly if you can't do the work, right? And so I think it is important to have somebody who can, you know, provide that insight to say, like, yes, this is going to be someone who possesses those skills to be able to do this job well.
Sorry if we didn't make that more clear.
Anything else on the principal search or your principal search?
Ask a question, right?
Of course.
I'd be curious on knowing the committee's perspective on whether the interim would be an eligible candidate for a full-time job, a permanent job. The reason I ask that question is it does create some complications, both in terms of if the interim is not perceived as a good candidate and someone else is hired, then you do have to complete the year. Someone who hasn't chosen necessarily years front runner. And then secondarily, you have someone inside an interim who consider, who might be considered a full-time candidate, could potentially impact your pool. An outsider is saying something, that person has an inside track to the job. I want to ask this question. I've seen it mostly happen at the college level where they're doing hiring. They'll literally say if an interim comes in, they're not eligible for the full-time job. That just sort of takes that whole set of variables off the table. I'm just curious about whether you all thought about that at this point. And I don't know what your pool is and whether you're looking at retirees who wouldn't be full-time, whether you're looking at
the pool, it would be difficult for us to say that because I think the people, the small number of people that we have in the pool who are skilled, I think would also be interested in the full-time position. I don't know that for sure, but I think they would be.
My recommendation would be to go into it saying that the interim is the interim. There's no guarantee that the person, would just remove the tag and become the permanent. But they would also be eligible to, if they so choose, apply for that permanent position just like anyone else would. And again, that's for, ultimately your consideration, but that would be my recommendation is to treat them separately and allow that intern to enter the pool if they choose to pursue that permanent position. It's hard to tell. We don't know who the candidate is going to be. And so there are some other variables depending on whether they are a retiree or whether they're not. And I think we have a mixed bag. Some folks who are saying like, no, I'm literally just want to do a short-term stint, and others who, may look at it differently, or their decision-making might change over time, right? So we don't know that either, but
that's true.
But I would recommend, saying that, yes, you can certainly come on as an intern. There's no guarantee, but you're more than welcome to apply if you're interested.
And I don't know, I'm not an expert on the hiring, and just to follow up a little bit, just to get the different perspectives is, if things are going well and that person does want to put themselves in as a candidate with so much turnover, it'd be like, well, wait a minute, we actually really like what's happening now. And this person's put their name in and now you're telling us we can't, that's sort of, I understand that there's other technical reasons why that can be a bad situation, but you
could theoretically have a letter from the full faculty. I've seen it before, of endorsement for the owner saying, you got a great candidate here. We all just install them as a full-time. But then if you have a process you want to be true to, that can come across somewhat disrespectful. I've seen districts lose candidates because they twiddle the thumbs too long when they're going through the process. I'm not trying to complicate things for y'all.
No, I think perspectives are really good.
Yeah, I just think it's it's a great job interview for somebody. A long-term couple-month job interview. And, by March, you probably have a pretty good sense of it. It's someone who is, it's resonating with people in the district. Just a thought.
And I think the opposite could also be true, though. I think that if you were to say you absolutely are now barred from the permanent job, that you'll lose applicants too, right? And that in our current pool, I could see some of the folks probably withdrawing if that were one of the conditions. I agree with you that other folks, for the full principal search, may look at this and say, oh, well, there already is somebody, so maybe I won't go after it. But, again, I would also say if you think you're the best candidate, then throw your hat in the ring and come out and compete. And I've seen it go both ways, right? Sometimes people do come in and out-compete someone who people thought was going to be the awesome favorite.
Any further on that? Okay, we've been rescheduling subcommittee meetings, bouncing them around because of the various searches that we're involved in. At some point, we need to reschedule. And I think in terms of the governance and leadership and finance, I think maybe you need to talk with Liz and find out when she's available, and then maybe we schedule once you find out some times, Elizabeth, because Liz is going to be very busy with your committee too, and I know we're not the only district she works with. So maybe we wait and see what times you can get from Liz, and then we'll, in terms of those two subcommittees, work from there. And I think teaching and learning has something happening very soon.
It was supposed to be today, so we bumped it to next week.
Oh, okay.
We were back and
And
forth
of
on
course, you
whether we
guys
were
are
gonna.
meeting all the time.
We'll meet tomorrow and
Right.
plan some more meetings then.
And school building.
Sorry, Bob, just on finance.
Yeah,
As,
we may need to schedule the finance separately from.
yeah, I think it would just be good, and we have to decide right now, but from Melissa's perspective on the budget process to figure out, when it's a
Yeah.
good time to put something on that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what Christine comes up with for a time. If it's way out there, then we'll schedule finance separately.
Wait, I'm sorry, did I missed something. Christine's doing governance leadership.
Well,
Yeah,
because
so usually it's met on the same night as finance. So it's
Because-
sort of co-scheduled.
because she and I are on the same committee.
Oh, because I will tell you, I will not bother anyone, but I'm gonna try if I can to come to some of these meetings because, and this may be me going down a path I don't need to, but I attended a session on foundation budgeting. And I felt a little bit like a kindergartner trying to learn to do algebra. And I was like, I might just need to start showing up at these meetings because I have a learning curve. And I really appreciate, by the way, that most of the time when we do our budget process, all of that, and for Lenox Foundation budget doesn't always mean as much, but there's sort of a funneling into like, this is the important stuff to know. But I found myself not liking the fact that I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. And so I'm gonna just I'll just try to reach out to get those dates. Well, they get posted anyway, but to just show up and I'll be listening.
Okay,
Okay.
we might not be talking about the foundation budget.
Yeah,
Well, I
Melissa
know.
just gives us that.
There's a
number.
lot of I know, there's a
Actually,
lot
she
of.
doesn't even, it doesn't even make the cut of a number that gets given.
Right.
I think what we're really hearing is you need to schedule a number of one-on-one sessions with
Well,
Melissa.
I'm not gonna
really-
bother her.
To really
for
dig
too
in
much,
on this.
but there
particular
are some
project.
places I do need to dig in, and Burke 12 may be also one of those that I try to be learning a little bit
Yeah,
more.
the foundation budget is important, but the city gets the chapter 70 money. And we don't see it directly as a revenue source. And so it is important more so in a regional than I'm finding in a municipality. So
Yeah, and they've
But-
got some new initiatives with rural schools, and they've got
Yeah.
there's a couple of new things that were brought up, and again, I was still too much in my kindergarten brain to know what to ask,
yeah,
but
we're not a rural school.
yeah.
No.
What are we?
We have like 6 coffee shops.
You can't be rural if you get all these
So
copies.
now that I've confessed my ignorance, you all have to like, just,
Yeah, they have rural school aid funding now for the past, I think this is the 4th year maybe.
14 minus the
And
number of
it's-
coffee
it's such a
shops.
bush to get up on.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I was looking at these, yeah.
but I can help you.
Thank you.
Don't worry, Ronnie, I was talking to her for half an hour about revenue, so.
By the way, our friends at MASC, and one in particular is Tracy Novick, is like, she's also on school committee in Worcester, and she's the rep that presented this, and I was just like, your brain, like there's a lot going on in there. It was really good. It's pretty impressive. She's just knows it. It's really good. And the MASC does have a lot of people there that really are helpful.
Well, you remember what Glenn Pucci used to say, he's the MSc director. That, we always say, well, it's not rocket science. The rocket science say, well, it's not the foundation budget.
Yeah.
So, anyway. Motion to adjourn,
I move to adjourn.
I second.
Thank you
all
all.
in favor?
Aye. Thank you all.
Adjourn, 8:23.